recruiting fallout from conference expansion. Does adding Oregon, Washington, does it help Wisconsin in recruiting? We're going to talk about that. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. And we're bringing in Brian Smith, the Locked On's recruiting insider. Definitely somebody that is going to bring a lot of insight to today's show. A lot is going on. He's got his notebook. We're ready to go. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Brian, let's talk about this. I actually originally wanted to start with Remington Moss, the 25 commit, good-sized cornerback. I really like him, and we were going to talk conference expansion because nothing official had happened yet. And now it's basically happened. Oregon and Washington are going to join the Big Ten. That's been reported. Thamel, McMurphy, all over the place. There's a final vote. But barring any really weird issues, they're heading to the Big Ten. How does this impact Wisconsin, the Big Ten, from a recruiting standpoint?
Well, my really brief notes are the ones that the people that vote care about. And they all lead to the M word, and that is big road games, TV publishing those road games, unique, all the splash, all the glass, all the stuff you and I could give two craps about because we're traditionalists. The people that vote look at it completely opposite. They're the guy that you don't like in the stiff suit when you go to the bank for a home loan.
Mm-hmm.
That's who they are. And if they were here, I would say many other things if I wasn't on air. I'll let your mind wander.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Look, the recruiting is going to be interesting from the following. One of my bucket lists, and because I'm in media, I'll get to do this eventually, is to go to a game at Autzen when it's a meaningful game. I don't give a crap about them playing Sacramento State. But when they're playing Wisconsin or somebody that, you know, a top 15 matchup, the winner of this game stays in, you know what I mean? Like that game. And I think recruits will look at that too, because a lot of kids I know here in Florida, they're fascinated with Oregon and the uniforms. I know people either love them or hate them. Younger people love them. And playing against them is part of it. It's going to help teams when they get to see more games. It's more NFL-like because you're traveling coast to coast. And it is. You're going to travel more. You're going to see more things. You're going to be in bigger situations. This is how we prepare you for the National Football League. I guarantee you that's going to be one of the pitches that Ohio State and Wisconsin, all these schools make. And then the other part of it is you're going to find out who you are. If you don't want competition, and both of them are obviously good schools, why in the heck would you go join the Big Ten? Wisconsin or anybody else, you sign up for that league, you sign up to play against teams that, you know, they've got 300-pound guys all over the place. You better be ready. So that just expands because it's new teams. Obviously, next year, it's SC and UCLA. I'll be curious when these two are. I assume it's next year, too.
They're coming in. What I've read is all four coming in next year now. So the new schedules that they just made, they'll like.
Yeah. Just throw those out.
Yeah.
We don't need them.
Yep. Start over. So here's a question then. And at the exposure standpoint, you're talking about the more eyeballs, the better matchups, all that makes sense to me. Let's zoom in specifically on Wisconsin right now. Does this lead to Wisconsin potentially going into the Pacific Northwest and getting more players, or do you think that's not quite that simple?
You're close. You'll get somebody. That area, this could be interesting because like Hawaii, some of the Pacific Island players, you know, Hawaiian and different areas, for whatever reason, the Badgers have hooked into that. You wouldn't think so, but they have. And maybe they get a little more of that, like Seattle has some of that, Portland, etc. You might get some more of that. But more importantly, and this I guarantee, I'll go ahead and write it for you. When we go out in a month, blah, 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 they plan all their recruiting and everything. You got to do everything that makes sense because that's a long flight. We're going to recruit the greater San Francisco area, the peninsula. Like Tom Brady grew up 30 minutes from San Francisco. That area's got players. You're going to recruit that area and then go to a game or whatever. You're going to do different things. Even if you go out a day earlier, some of the coaches might go out on Thursday, even if they can't see the kids play, They'll go to practice. They'll go get transcripts. So you'll see some LA, San Francisco, even, Fresno. All of a sudden, why is everybody mentioning Wisconsin? Oh, that's right, because they're really just a coast-to-coast conference now. It's New York to LA.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've never even comprehended something like that. Obviously, USC and UCI are a little better than Rutgers, but it's still LA to New York, man. So that's going to be an advantageous situation for the Badgers, even if you get one or two guys, just one or two, and add to what you're already getting, especially, again, what do I always say? Guys outside the numbers. California's got plenty of those. They can change their program. So it's going to be good for Wisconsin.
You and I had talked about this off the air a little bit, but would an addition of a Florida State, a Clemson, would that have a bigger impact from a recruiting standpoint for Wisconsin than a Washington, Oregon?
Yes, and it's not even close. It's distance is better, and the South is just full of defensive players, which is what Wisconsin needs. Speed guys. You can throw a rock where I'm standing right now, and you have a 50-50 chance on hitting a Division I defensive back. So it's just they need to be down here more and getting more kids. That's something else. Like there's a kid I know they're in on now in Fort Lauderdale. They got a really good shot at. If you play down here and the kids physically see you, the papers are talking about you, the media outlets, it's more tangible to them. And Florida kids are fickle anyway, but you play down here, it's going to matter, man. Most important teams they can play are probably the ones the AD at Wisconsin doesn't want to. Florida State, and Miami, because it's all three are in the state of Florida. They need to recruit better down here and, get a Georgia kid or a South Carolina kid. Absolutely. Now, I'm not picking on California. I would just always take Florida over California, especially for what Wisconsin needs, and that's defensive players.
Yeah, it's funny. So you throw a rock and hit a D1 defensive back. You could drop an asteroid some years in Wisconsin and not find a D3 defensive back. Like it is tough. Talk really quick. You mentioned him, a Fort Lauderdale, and I don't know if you are able to share anything here, but you said a Fort Lauderdale defensive back the Badgers may have a shot at.
Well, there's a couple of kids. I forget which school it was he transferred. There's a player that was at Dillard. I think he might have already visited Wisconsin. I forget his name, but I was at the Broward County high school media day. Down here, it's so big, we have media days for the high schools. And we just send them all together, like, Jeremiah Smith and a bunch of guys interviewed him and a bunch of other guys. And down here, like just in Broward, top of my head, there will be 8 to 10 kids that are Division I corners just in Broward County. And this is one of them. He's like 6'1" or whatever. And Wisconsin's right there. I forget which school he transferred to, but it's just like, if you're in that situation and he's one of the like really good players, you can't not go after them, because that's the spot that Wisconsin usually, not always, but usually needs. I just remembered that when I got on, I forgot to look it up, but it's just interesting that now that they've got a coaching change and they obviously have history, specifically with corner, certain guy for the Jets is going to help Wisconsin recruiting, even though he never played for him, because the staff is at least partially intact from there. I bet you money you're going to start seeing kids that think they're the next Sauce Gardner, which, by the way, is ridiculous. Don't kid yourself. There's not many of those walking around, but yeah, he's a really special player. But at the same time, after they get onto the field, you're going to see more of this, because they'll start playing a little more cover one. I don't know how much they can play this year, but that's what Florida kids want to see. Are you going to be aggressive and go after it? I mean, if they do, the Florida kids will come. They have no fear whatsoever. I guarantee you.
Well, and speaking of not a Florida kid, but speaking of more defensive back talent coming in, coming up next, we're going to talk Remington Moss, the 25 commit for the Badgers, somebody I'm pretty excited about. We're going to talk about him coming up next on Locked On Badgers, but first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at LinkedIn. And listen, we're talking talent acquisition in recruiting. What better way to talk talent acquisition than LinkedIn? These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have the best access to qualified candidates that are available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Something I've used, something a lot of people in my company have used to expand our professional network. It's not just for hiring managers. You can go out and get smarter, meet contacts, help your career progress. But for hiring managers, they have things like screening tools to get all the people you don't have any business, that have no business interviewing for your job, out of the way. Save your time, save their time, find the right skills and experience. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, let's bring Brian back in here. Brian, so we do have recruiting news. Remington Moss, 6'2", 180-pound cornerback safety. It's hard to tell exactly where he'll play. Obviously, just coming off his sophomore year, too, so there's growth there out of Virginia. Really good early offer list. Schools very interested in him. What did you like about Remington Moss?
Very physical and has a lot of length. I think his ability to be aggressive at the line of scrimmage will help him in like be at a nickel or something like that. The way he runs and the way he plays, I still think he's better suited to safety. I don't think he would be a cover one guy for like LSU or Florida traditionally, but the length and the size and the just ability to hit and all that, he can definitely play in the Big Ten in the deep secondary at the least. If Wisconsin wants to go with more of a zone coverage, I could see him playing some cover 3, but I got to see more to see if he's really a cover 1 guy.
Well, and one of the things you've talked about on this show before is how unique a guy, and we just talked about how unique a guy like Sauce Gardner is, a cornerback with a lot of length that can hold up. Yeah. You know, we just, in last year's cycle, the Badgers, I say we, but the Badgers brought in Amari Snowden, another really long corner.
Yes.
It's hard to find those players. So here's a 6'2" frame, really physical. He just looks like a safety to me. And I think that's kind of what you're saying here, that's a safety build.
There's nothing wrong with where he's at. It's just that I don't think it's a situation with like how he plays, the way he runs, that I see definitely corner. When I say corner, my standard's a little different. Like I get to see the IMG kids, Miami Central kids, stuff like that. It's a different animal. And part of it's just who they're going against and they're used to it. Maybe he can, but I mean, Virginia football is good, but it's still not South Florida or like Orlando. And I need to see more. So he's also a very handsy kid. Right now you would get a flag on about every play. It's just technique and all that stuff. But if you put him at safety and he can charge downhill with his natural aggression, I think it would be a perfect fit. And there's nothing wrong with that either. So you can't teach the length, brother. And he's also a physical player. So safety is the very safe bet.
One of the things I've always, and you mentioned handsy, that's something my buddy Justin Joko's on the show a lot, said he gets a little handsy at times. Yes. To me, there's a couple reasons that happens, but I want your take on that. One of them is, some players are just a little raw. They need technique work. Some players get a little handsy because they can't quite keep up on the breaks. And what do you see on film when you see people get handsy? Where do you think that comes from typically?
Nerves, especially when a receiver is running and they turn. Younger DBs freak out, especially in a camp setting or something like that. I'll see a kid in a game, etc. Then the next spring, we'll see Under Armour in Florida. They come to Orlando and they go to South Florida. Kids that aren't handsy will get real handsy because they're nervous. And they're going against guys that are really good. But at the same time, if you do that, you're still being critiqued and your film's going everywhere. So there's no shortcut. When you're a corner, you can't do it, man. And the higher the level you go, the more the hanky comes out. I mean, at the NFL level, you breathe on a guy, they throw 3 flags. So I don't know if it's fixable for him. It's usually more mental than anything. But yet after 5 yards, you got to let it ride, man. They're going to call flags.
And then talk to me about, I think outside of Landon Locke, the quarterback in 25 we talked about a little bit, everyone else we've talked about has been a little closer to the college level, obviously, coming off their junior film. We talked about some guys that are coming off their senior film from last year's cycle. Coming off the sophomore film, to me, he looks really physically well built for a sophomore.
Yeah, he does.
And that's impressive to me. I'm curious, when you evaluate sophomore film, are you looking at it a little differently?
To a certain extent, it depends on the position. Like if I see an offensive lineman as a sophomore, it's a bonus because their body's going to change so much. Quarterback, to a certain degree, it's the same deal. For a DB, it's easier because either you can turn and run or you can't. It's about flexibility first. He can do that. He's not super fluid, but I don't see the explosiveness to be a catch-up guy if he gets beat. And that's what I talk about with cover 1. And I think he would be better in zone. But I also look at like his upper body, how he's kind of chiseled. And I say at the very least, he could be a hybrid guy and be a striker that plays in the box some and comes over the slot and plays physical. So he's just built differently than most kids his age. I don't know if it's because he's worked hard, if it's all natural or a little of both, but yeah, he's an impressive looking cat.
All right, we're going to take a very quick break for our friends of the show. We're going to come back and ask, how worried should Badger fans be with Alabama potentially offering Darrion Dupree? Is this just a sign of good talent evaluation? We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers, but first, a quick break for our friends of the show. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. Let's get back to Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. Brian, so Darrion Dupree recently tweeted out an offer. Wisconsin's one of Wisconsin's 3 running back commits in the 24 class. Alabama has offered him. I want to start here. To me, this just feels like if you're going to elevate recruiting, Wisconsin fans aren't as used to this, right? We're not as used to Alabama coming after one of our verbal commits. This feels like an offshoot of elevated recruiting.
It's not an offshoot. It's a direct offshoot. Alabama doesn't offer kids for fun. That is a business organization. So if you're not getting Alabama to come after your kid, you're not going to win playoff games. That's the first thing. You're not going to beat Alabama with non-Alabama players. It's just the way it is. If you don't believe me, ask TCU. Look what they did. I mean, Alabama and Georgia are pretty much the same thing. So you got to win some of those battles. I'm not saying it was their first choice, but they offered him. And, I like Nick Saban's evaluation skills. Call me crazy. I would say that it's a pretty good sign. Hopefully they can kind of fend him off. There's a kid named Hill that Alabama really, really wants from Meridian, Mississippi. He's getting ready to announce he's probably going to go to South Carolina or Alabama. If they offered this kid, I'm guessing they think he's going to South Carolina. That's my guess. But, last year Alabama got 2 great running backs. It's a little harder to recruit running back this year. Both of them hit the ground running at fall camp. So I don't know how much interest he would have, but it's kind of interesting that Bama offered in August. So to be honest with you.
I'm trying to think of the best way to word this, and it's probably impossible to say, is he going to go to Alabama? But what's kind of the track record for Alabama coming in late on a school like Wisconsin? And how often is the original school able to hold Alabama off if Alabama really wants the kid?
Well, if it's a Southern kid, you're in deep crap. But if it's not a Southern kid, then it's a million different factors. Like kids that grew up in Alabama, Georgia, Florida, that wouldn't be good for Wisconsin because that's a regional for them, but not regional for the Badgers. Beyond that, it's just feel. Wisconsin's going to say, hey, we were here the whole time, whereas Saban and the Tide just now offered. I guarantee you that's going to be part of the conversation. But I know from talking to parents over the years and this and that, I've had a guy tell me unsolicited, hey, if Alabama calls, you got to go. So it depends on the family. And I don't know how much cachet Nick still has. He's 71 years old, but it's still Alabama, and he's got all those rings. So it'll be interesting to see if he at least takes a visit. That would be the first question I have. Is
this why – and I find this really interesting. Back when Dylan Jones committed, so the Badgers have the 3 running back class. You have Dupree, Jones, and Gideon Atuka. Right. And I had people – say, gosh, I don't know if you want to take a 3rd running back because it might force someone out the door. And my point was always, if he's really talented, you take the 3rd running back because down the road someone could flip to a different school. And I think you just stack talent. But could this also be a situation where now that Alabama's offered and Darrion Dupree says, oh, and you've taken these other running backs, there's a million ways you could twist this, but are we in an era where you just take as much talent as you can because down the road someone's going to flip or transfer and you just stack talent now?
At quarterback, yes. There's some factors that kind of go into that. But, man, that's a great question. You got to be careful with your base. Like, there are times when coaches would rather take a player over here, but he's not a local kid. And they're trying not to – and this is flat out just true. And they're trying not to tick off the local coach. They can't win. What they want, that option does not exist. And believe me, coaches are really anal about that, and it drives them nuts. But high school coaches get pissed when schools go out of state a lot. If you're Alabama or Georgia, it doesn't matter. They can tick off whoever they want because they're getting elite kids out of state at a ridiculous rate. There aren't another 5 schools that are like that outside of maybe Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas a little bit. There's not many. So you got to be careful. But, again, Wisconsin's going to take some shots in Florida, Georgia, Texas, done good in Texas. So maybe that's the route they go and just say the heck with it. Because if you bring in 3 good running backs, one of them could move to another spot, safety, receiver, whatever. And if it doesn't work out, somebody leaves too. And you keep recruiting. Alabama does that. Alabama signs more players than anybody else. But again, they can. The kids that don't make it, he just gets rid of them. I mean, it's not a very friendly thing, and in media there doesn't talk about it, but they get rid of more kids than anybody. It's a football factory more than it is a school. So it's different for every program. I'm curious to see if Wisconsin does much of that, because the administration there wants the kids to get degrees. At Alabama, it's not as big a deal to them. So that'll be interesting.
Right. Yeah, it's very, very fascinating times in college football. He is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. Really do appreciate the time. Last question here, just because we've been talking about recruiting, we've been talking about conference expansion. If you had to put money on it right now, where does Notre Dame end up eventually? Do they ever jump into the Big Ten?
It depends. Like, one of the things that, and this is just part of the deal, one of the things the Big Ten has done is they went and got USC. One of Notre Dame's big deals is they want to have versatility outside their conference. If they go into one, and if you go into conference, it's 9 games. We only get 3. They get to pick their schedule right now. Everybody wants them, whether the fan bases want to hear it or not. They're never going to get locked out because of the TV. The TV people want Notre Dame. So there are people out there bitching right now. They hate Notre Dame. It's never going to happen. They bring in more money than about anybody. But Notre Dame could go to the Big Ten, and SC's already involved. And if you listen, and I know you read about this, one of the other schools that Notre Dame plays a lot is Stanford. That's another possibility because, they're like-minded academic institutions. If they go after Stanford, I mean, it's more about Olympic sports and all that, but they're not going to admit it publicly. I guarantee it's Notre Dame related too. They want Notre Dame desperately, but short term, I actually found out about some of this today. Notre Dame wants to remain independent. They want to control their schedule, and you can't do that in a conference. So I have no idea when it'll happen. I think joining the Big Ten now would be fine with the way it is, but that's just me. There's a lot of stubborn people, though. They want to make all the decisions.
Yeah, there's no doubt there. He is Brian Smith. We try to get him on once a week, and we're smarter because of it. Brian, thank you so much, my friend.
By the way, Xavier Lucas was the player. He's an American Heritage. He's really good.
Yeah, he's committing, I think, next week or the week after. He's committing pretty soon. Him and Florida State's in on him, or at least was in on him.
I don't know if Florida State, because they got Charles Lester. I don't know if FSU is still – I don't know. But Lucas can play, and it would be a really good thing for Wisconsin. He can play safety or corner. It would make any difference. Really good player.
Love it. Hopefully we're talking about a commitment from him next week or the week after. That'd be amazing.
All right,
Brian. Thank you so much, my friend.
All right, take care.